Hello and welcome into another episode of Tigers Radio Podcast, episode 419 here at MotorCityBengals.com. I'm Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Chris Brown and Uper. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartMedia, and Stitchler. And Emily Walden was supposed to be our guest tonight, but she had a lot going on today, so we perfectly 100% understand. So, no, Emily. However, as you can see right here, I do have the. Apparently, I don't know how to look into a camera. So I have the Pitching Ninja design shirt that you can find on RotoWare. So the link will be available on our. They were out of shirts and they extended the sale again. So you can find it at rotoware.com/Pitching Ninja Emily's Fight Edition. So please support the podcast. Please support that. And like I said, and once again, we have our friend down in Toledo, Skits. Is that right? Skits. Yeah, Skits down in Toledo. If you're watching us on YouTube. And also we're streaming on for the first time ever on Twitch. So I'm not sure how that's going to go, and we'll see what happens. But again, this is the shirt right here, and they did a fantastic job with it, and it goes to her cost. So she'll be with us next week. Dan Hasty will be probably with us in the next couple days as well. But a lot of things to frustrate Michiganders, including the snow, but in baseball, we'll get to that in a second. And of course, go to our patreon.com/Tigers Radio Pod. Everything goes back into the website. Everything goes back into what we do, better equipment, yada, yada, yada. So please support that. That'd be great. So, but yeah, gentlemen, somehow you avoided all the snow, correct, down in Iowa?
Yeah, it's been extremely cold. It's been -2, -3 degrees in the morning with some high winds. But yeah, luckily the snow passed south of us. So I'm all about that.
Yeah, I think we probably got a little bit more snow here than you got in Dearborn. I'm not sure, Rogelio. I mean, you were sending me some pictures early on where it seemed like it was still raining by you while it was snowing pretty hard here. So we're kind of right at and I'm only, I don't know, I'm 45 minutes northwest of you, so it's not super far north, but it was just the way this storm was shaped. It kind of had like that, forward / momentum.
Kind of doing that weird thing, and there's a lot of snow also towards the Toledo border, as Skits said on the YouTube channel. And yeah, in terms of 12 to 18 inches down in Toledo. Oh, wow. Didn't expect that. And for us, I mean, the weather people, of course, obviously the people are upset that we're supposed to get 12 around that too, according to the news forecast, Chris, like 24 inches or some 2 feet or whatever.
I think we're seeing it was guaranteed to be like 8 to 12 inches and up to 15, 18. I'm looking now. It looks like the most they saw was 13.
And the reason why
up to 13 inches across southern Michigan.
What I hate about this time of year when it comes to weather, and I know the news people have to do their job and fill content, but man, they're just like, we have your news update. It's still snowing. Okay. Thanks. I mean, like, traffic, how's traffic going? Same it was 5 minutes ago. What do you do when the same tips come up too? What do you do when it's cold outside? What do you do when you shovel your snow? And Google's good. There's a lot of, I don't know. It's just some of it.
I have somehow made it. I am 52 years old. I have made it through life without having a survival pack in my car. In case I go off the road. They've been telling me to have that candy bar, water, and gloves for 40 years now, but I've made it here so far.
Candy bar. Oh, so you melt the candy bar or something, or is this just for energy?
Just for something to eat, yeah, in case you're stranded out there for days on end.
What about a Cliff Bar? This seems like the more healthy thing
to do.
Cliff
Bar will work.
Yeah, but yeah, it's one of those things where I just really, go ahead, Chris.
I put a link in our private comments there. It was from The Simpsons about the Class 3 kill storm. I've been stuck in the snow a handful of times, never in a life or death situation, but it is super annoying and embarrassing. I remember I got stuck on like a main road and a tow truck just happened to be going by like, hey, all right, we'll pull you out, $80. I'm like, this sucks. But it's nice to get out.
Well, the good news is for us where we are, you guys and me, up in the UP, they're going to be pushing up to 200 inches of snow here by the middle of the month. So
Yeah, somewhere, Kurt, our boss over at Fanside, is yelling and screaming about it. So,
well, and of course, if any people happen to be listening from AA Erie, Erie is one of the snowiest cities in the country, I believe. It's right there off the lake, and they get all that lake effect snow.
And we already have a question in the chat room, which we'll definitely be addressing that tonight. That's a good question too. And the question is for everybody who's listening on the podcast, because I forget that we do have an audio medium to attend to, is requesting a federal mediator for the lockout necessary. We'll get to that because I do have some kind of question or some really strong opinions about that. And before we get to that though, I do want to talk about the top 100. So ESPN did some. I would like to say, would they normally do this list every other time of year at all, Chris Huber?
The top 100?
Yeah.
I don't think they do that every year. I know that.
Or I'm sorry, would they have done this any other year, I should say?
Oh, who knows? I know that Joe Posnanski just released a book, I think, about the top 100 baseball players. So maybe they thought that they could compete with that, or that gave them an idea.
Yeah.
MLB Network does the top 100 players right now every year, I think. They're probably not doing it this year because they can't. I don't know if they could talk about players. But yeah, I don't know what the impetus was for that article. It's not like it's the 100th anniversary of baseball or whatever.
What's interesting of ESPN though, if you go to the ESPN website, by the way, you go to the front page, and so the top 4 on and I'm going to show this to everybody who's watching this at home, but for the podcast purposes, for the audio medium, check it out. If you go to ESPN right now, and if you go there, apparently it's not working right now on my end, but if you go to ESPN, you have to click on the 3 dots to get to the MLB part. So usually it's right now it's NFL, NBA, NHL, soccer, golf, football, and then baseball. So baseball is now delegated to the 3 dot part. So
it's the off season.
Yeah. Yeah, you did say that. That's true. Okay. By the way, another thing I want to mention then before we get to that is the AAA schedule expands by 6 games to 150, which for Mudhead fans, that's exciting to see. But I just want to throw in there before we get to the top 100. So here's the top 100, and I put the numbers on which Tigers listed. And by the way, somebody was like, "Well, what about Eddie Matthews? He was a Tiger for a half a season, if that. Come on." He was on a 68 team as like a veteran bat you added. So,
famous Tiger Matt Stairs.
Yes.
Famous softball player. But they have Barry Larkin starts off the list at number 100. I'm not going to go through the whole entire list. I just want to mention some of the highlights a little bit. Charlie Garringer is the first Tiger to come up at number 96, and you forget how good he was. I mean, like just 84 WAR, and he was a catcher. It was he was born in Michigan. And they described in the biography, they have him as the stuff of a Norman Rockwell painting. Alrighty. Bryce Harper comes in at 94. I don't know if you guys have. Is there any controversial hot takes here for the 100 through that part of the list?
100 through 75, 100 through 50. I have a general hot take about the whole thing, but I don't think it's particularly, special to the back end of the list. It's just in my view that any player alive right now is 10 times the player from 50 years ago and 100 times the player from 100 years ago. Like it's a completely different game. These athletes are so much better now. It's one thing to compare guys across eras, but it's like, how many times did Babe Ruth even see a 90-mile-an-hour fastball? Did that come up a couple times on Twitter this week that somebody was talking about that he didn't really face anybody? And I mean, if you think about it, he didn't face Satchel Paige in his prime. He didn't face many of the Negro League pitchers. So when he faced, I'm trying to think he didn't face Bob Feller either. I don't think.
No,
probably not. He probably faced maybe late career Walter Johnson.
Yeah, Chris. And what about Christy
Mathewson, maybe
Yeah.
Mordecai Three Finger Brown. I mean, there's some great pitchers back then, but again,
Oh, there wasn't even interleague play. I mean, he may not have.
yeah, and yeah, you've got presumably some of the best baseball players on the planet aren't even allowed to compete against him. Now they did. He may have done some all-star performances and barnstorming and things like that, but it's just a completely different game. I often do when we use the stat head on Baseball Reference. I usually filter since the integration era.
Yeah.
So 47 and on. And even then it's a little bit iffy because you're only, it's not exactly a level playing field, but
I think if you're going to do the top 100 is fine. It's fun. It's academic. It gives us something to talk about.
Right.
I think a much better process would be do a top 20 by decade. Now you got something, maybe you really can compare these people.
Yeah. Because like, for example, if you put Fernando Valenzuela, he was, I mean, in terms of like for the 80s, I mean, for the first 6 or 7 seasons before Tommy Lasorda blew out his arm essentially by overpitching him. You could have him in the conversation. You could have, even in the case of somebody like John Tudor, who won 20 games with the Cardinals?
Yeah.
Saberhagen too. I mean, those guys are kind of like that small window if I think about the 80s, for example.
Yeah, and then that would be a good argument for someone like Jack Morris, who isn't one of the great players of all time. He's in the Hall of Fame now. It was, the huge source of debate, but he was generally regarded as the best pitcher of the 80s. I mean, you got Roger Clemens appearing in the middle of the decade and Dwight Gooden there, flashing bright. And you mentioned Saberhagen, all this, a lot of guys, but Morris was the workhorse, and you could throw him at 20 as the best player of the 80s and probably get away with it.
Yeah.
But that was, I mean, one of the things when I see Barry Larkin and Roberto Alomar on there, they were great players, but whenever I see that, I think, okay, like Trammell and Whitaker were just as good, if not better, at least, by modern metrics, but they just, they continue to not get that level of respect because they weren't as revered while they were playing, at least, on a national level.
Yeah. And there's that somebody on, I think it was on Twitter, said the lazy take about, and this happens a lot to Tiger fans where they'll say, well, it's an East Coast, West Coast bias and what have you. Okay, that's kind of a tire play thing. And you have to take yourself out of the element of being a local fan and look at the stats for what they are. I will say that of all of it, like Frank Thomas over Miguel, but then again, Frank Thomas has had more home runs than Miguel. Does Miguel hit at a higher average? Sure. He's going to hit for 3,000. Absolutely. But I think this is where the conflict begins with a regional game versus a national game. I mean, would you guys say that's correct?
Yeah, I think there's definitely parts of that. And I actually, when I saw Frank Thomas, I'm like, is he better than Miguel Cabrera? But then I look, he's got 500 home runs. He's a career 301 hitter, I think. I think his on-base percentage career is like 419. And I think Miguel's like 390 or something like that. So you could make an argument there that Thomas is a better player than Miguel Cabrera, sure.
Hey, here's one for you, Uper. What about Robin Yount at number 80? I think he should be ranked a little higher than 80. I mean,
yeah, that's probably a little low. I think.
Yeah.
So much. If he would have had a little longer back into the career, I believe, it's a little bit better. He really flashed early. I wonder if part of it is, when we look back now and rank these people and some of the, like a Larkin, you just wonder how much the cable TV Sports Center plays into it. We saw so much more of these people on a nightly basis on highlights and just shows like Baseball Tonight. And that's something like Whitaker and Trammell missed out on, especially in their really formative years.
Yeah, that's fair to say, because even you're talking about, I used to watch ESPN every night, 94, 95.
Yeah.
And that was like when I watched it a lot. And
that was really its heyday. I think that's really when it was the thing that nobody missed.
Yeah, and that was for sure. And that kind of coincided. You got the revival of the Yankees there in the late 90s too, when everything was humming along and they're on all the time. And then you have Boston appearing. And so you're going to get some, I don't know if Schilling made the list. I don't think he did. But there, and I think David Ortiz was on there. So you see some of that where these teams that were, very popular there when baseball was kind of a big thing.
Yeah, and even something like, when I think about before the lowering of the mound in 1969 too, like what the difference between that and those, I feel like if you look at guys like, I'm thinking of Harmon Killebrew, I'm thinking of, because in terms of home run power in the 60s, what have you, Roger Maris comes to mind early in the 60s, but then I will have to do more research on like the mid 60s, but yeah, Tony Oliva for and he was later than that, right? Uper?
Tony Oliva would have been like
65, 64?
What is 80 right in there, late 70s?
Oh, Tony Oliva. I thought Tony Oliva was more in the late 60s.
Well, I think that was probably when he was right in his prime, was late 60s. But I would bet he was a rookie around 63, 64.
Okay, that's what I meant. Okay, so that's what I was trying to think of, like that kind of like, you have Frank Robinson, of course, but it just seems like the power hitters were few and far between until the early 70s, when you see the Reggie Jacksons in the world and all that. But
George Foster, yeah.
George Foster, Hank Greenberg at number 79, by the way, Vladimir Guerrero at 77, and and then Cap, of course. My opinion never forever changed of Cap Anson, number 76, when you find out he's kind of a
kind of. Yeah.
Oh, no, excuse me, not kind of. He is a douchebag. I can say a lot worse, but I'm not going to swear.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody not knows about this, but he refused to play against African American players.
Yep.
So sinking of the cap, not tip of the cap. Anyway, so by the way, if there's any Cap Addison relatives listening right now, sorry. I'm not sorry at all. I'm not sorry at all. No.
That's right.
Al Kaline comes in at number 71. I know Tiger fans are kind of wishing he was a little higher based off his WAR, but that was fair. Aussie Smith at number 69.
I know a lot of people who don't think Aussie Smith was all that great. And everybody believes that he was a terrific defender, but there's some belief that, like, hey, he did some flips and people like that, and that, like, bumps him up 15 spots or whatever. The one thing I didn't realize this until I was writing the other day. I wrote an article about the best Tigers drafts in history, and the Tigers, of course, drafted Aussie Smith, but they couldn't sign him. They were apart by a couple $1,000s.
Yeah.
And I looked, and I think it was 1987. He won a Silver Slugger without hitting a home run one year. 40 doubles, 0 home runs, Silver Slugger. I've never heard of such a thing.
That's an era where back then Sparky Anderson would yell at you if you were pumping weights.
Yeah.
It was a different time. And so
I had those big parks, those cookie cutter parks are fairly big, and the artificial turf lent itself to hitting the ball on the ground.
Yeah, and there's even, I was thinking about like Veterans Stadium, Olympia, the Riverfront. What's the one? It's Riverfront Cincinnati, but let's take on Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh was Three Rivers.
Three Rivers, yeah.
The Houston Astrodome.
Yeah. And there's all of them all kind of blend together. You're right, and also a lot of those baby blue uniforms too. But getting into baseball related items, so right now baseball, it looks like we're not gonna have baseball for a while. I'm sorry to say that. And to get to Skits' question is really it's a lot of posturing back and forth between, and I feel like a broken record, which is this is why next couple weeks, even month or so, there might be a couple weeks we're like, we're not gonna talk about anything. I mean, the minor league season we're definitely gonna be covering. We're gonna go full tilt on that. The Tigers will talk. There's 2 players the Tigers side we'll get to a little later as well. But so MLB asked, we mentioned this earlier, a federal mediator help essentially end the lockout. But by all accounts, isn't that just essentially helping the owners get this done and getting their way faster?
Well,
you be talking?
Well, I think a lot of it's going to depend on if it's going to be binding mediation, which I doubt it is.
Because they have to agree to it, right, Uber? They have to agree to that?
Both sides.
Yeah.
So if it's just a mediator in the room trying to, help them find common ground, I don't know how much that really helps. I think it might be more of like a PR gesture by the owners to say, hey, we're trying to get this done. We're bringing in help, that kind of thing. But I'm not sure what it's going to do in the long run.
Yeah, and it just sounds like they're bringing them into, and of course the players agreed to it, but it's going to have to be a series of. It feels like they're just until they get their way. They want the players to keep compromising. So I don't know. Oh, here's Chris. Chris is back there. All right, Chris, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, sorry for all of a sudden I couldn't hear you guys. I saw you talking. I couldn't hear anything. I don't know if you mentioned. I'm not a labor lawyer. I'm sure you didn't mention that, but Eugene Friedman is a guy on Twitter, and he usually has really great long looks at this sort of stuff. And he talked about. I read it. I skimmed over it a little bit. We were at the trampoline park tonight when this news broke, but he said that this could be seen as a good sign for the players in that the owners feel like the negotiations aren't going as well as they had hoped by this point. They thought the players would cave, and the players aren't, and so the owners are like, I don't know, you figure it out. And I think also was Evan Drellich, who writes for The Athletic, had a interesting quote about, because apparently baseball did this back in 94, 95 as well, and Donald Fear said it was a complete waste of time.
Yeah, they also did this in 81, and they didn't help come with a resolution either. So is it just someone? Again, we were just purely spitballing here. We're not lawyers, so. But is this some dude standing in a room going, "Okay, you say something"? No, don't talk at the same time. No, stop it, Rob. I'm gonna tell you again, Tony, put the bat down. Stop. Is that? I mean, are we talking about like a WWE ref that gets dressed up in a cheap ref costume and breaks up a fight? And Skits brings up. I think the lockout won't end until the beginning of the season or right before the season starts. I really think there's going to be a 150 game season, if not maybe even less than that. That's where I'm thinking they might be in line with the AAA season.
Yeah, I think I've speculated maybe 135 games or something like that. It really does depend on when they can actually iron this out. I think the idea behind the arbitrator obviously is like you get basically a third set of eyes and ears or whatever to go like, hey, you don't want this and you don't want this. What if we meet in the middle here on this? It just somebody else. I imagine it being like couples therapy almost, like two sides arguing and the therapist in the middle going, what now? Why do you feel like that? And what if you do this? And maybe that's just a silly way to think of it, but I don't know. It is kind of funny that the owners locked the players out, didn't contact them for whatever 6 weeks or whatever. They've given a couple proposals and then like thrown their hands up in the air and said, "Oh, we can't work with these people." Like they haven't really made a real effort, it doesn't seem. And now they're calling in the federal government, which usually doesn't work out well for the players, unfortunately.
No, and the thing is that one of the things that even you can get excited about with the minor league season. Of course you can. There's a lot to be excited about, but and I'm working on this article right now, and it's really for the fans who. Let's go a little rant here, but it's going to be part of my article. It will be coming out tomorrow. Look, you're going to complain on Twitter right now because, okay, Michigan basketball is in the doldrums. Michigan State's doing well. You have the upcoming big game between the Bengals and the Rams, and you're all excited about Matthew Stafford and all that stuff. I get it.
Oh.
We'll address that a little later, Uper. But my whole thing is this. All the fans, to me, sometimes social media like Twitter and Facebook is a giant pain in the ass sometimes because you have people on there burning a jersey or complaining to players or harassing, like in the case of that Ohio State basketball player because he messed up in a big game. Here's the thing. If you're that disgusted with baseball, I mean, outside of, maybe supporting your local indie podcast like us, maybe just don't go to games. Attendance was down last year, but also at the same time, there's COVID restrictions that play with that. So that number is kind of finicky at best. But if you're this disgusted and you're also that, that person's like, they're playing a kids game for free. Like, and they're playing our kids game for all this money. And I would go out there and play. No one wants to, like Kevin Goldstein said, no one wants to watch you play. And that's the line still sticks in my head. But a premise is put your money where your mouth is. Stop posturing and burning. Like the people that burn jerseys are just, it's so stupid to me.
It's bizarre.
It's bizarre. Oh, I'm going to show off on Twitter. No, you know how many times team accounts just go, oh, wait, it's on a blue check mark? I don't care. Gone. Be gone. Speak with your pocketbook. Speak with that. Take an action. And be posting on Twitter just to get a couple likes from your friends. Because that instant gratification, it's like that eating a chocolate chip cookie, or when you have the first bite of a cheeseburger or a cold Coke or whatever device or first hit of a cigarette, whatever. Just that is an instantaneous thing. But the fact that you're going to be trying, if there's the blackout, there's all these things that make it. I'll be posting it tomorrow. So our article will be tomorrow. So for answer the question on YouTube channel again, honestly, just do yourself a favor and put your money where your mouth is. Don't posture on social media. It doesn't make any sense. If you have an opinion to write something, great, write it. Maybe it'll get some visibility. But just when I see people get that mad about something, or like, for example, the sports, the Valley Sports announced that they're bringing back the same people, which it is what it is. Then turn into Dan Dickerson or mute the game. They're going to do what they're going to do. And it's like, just, I'm not trying to say that complaining online is not useful. I mean, like I said, you can complain of certain things, but it just seems like with baseball right now, the owner, it just seems like this giant mega thing. It's just not, they're not going to, they talk about listening to the fans, and some of them do, some of them don't.
I think for me, we hear it a lot over the years when baseball has had trouble that people are going to stop going. They're fed up. And that's fine to say, but I think the simple fact of the matter is people need crap to do in the summer. You got a family, you got to take them somewhere. You want to go on a date, you got to go somewhere. You want to meet with your buddies, you got to go somewhere. And once you run through a few things, what's left is a ball game. I think it's as simple as that. We need shit to do. and that's something that works for lots of groups. And I think that's what sustains the game. So no matter how hard they try to screw this up and how bad they make it look at times, they have the summer in their favor, and people want to be outside and go to a ball game. And I think we don't have to make it a whole lot more complex than that. That's always been my theory of why the game survives, and maybe they're going to put that to the test again this summer. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think you said, Raj, that put your money where your mouth is. Don't go to the games. You could also cancel your Bally Sports account, but it's all of that. It is really more like making yourself feel better, and I'm not saying that's not a worthy thing to do. I felt that way about the NFL like 3 or 4 years ago. I was like, I don't want to support this product anymore, and the Lions are awful, so there's nothing holding me there. So I just stopped. I quit playing fantasy football. I stopped watching NFL, and I ended up not missing it. Really, I've watched a couple games lately. Maybe they pulled me back in, but yeah, if you're that upset with what's going on, you don't have to watch. Don't support it. Again, it's not going to really hurt the owners. They're getting all their money from TV, from other people, all that stuff. But you can at least feel better that you're not, there's not the cognitive dissonance anymore. You're not supporting something that you kind of hate. And I guess that's the problem is you don't hate the game. You hate whatever, the system that the Rob Manfred-led ownership groups are imposing on players and viewers. So, but you can make yourself feel better by tuning it out if you want to, and still listen to us.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, I'm technically I'm a season ticket holder, and I'm still gonna go, but because it's part of what I do. I mean, it would be nice to get. I'm not gonna lie, it would be nice to get press box and all that, but in all reality, I know the reality of the situation. But at the same time, I'm also not gonna make this public. It would be disingenuous for me to sit here and go, well, the players should cop. No, the players are getting screwed big time. ownership is trying to do what they can, and for what we do the right, and we have to be objective, and that's our goal. I mean, as much as this is the thing that really pisses me off about working for a site like Fansided, the assumption is, Fansided, that means you're a fan and you're not uneducated and blah blah blah. No, that's not true at all. And there's a lot of people that write for the site. They're actually really good at what they do. Granted, but sometimes there's a misspelling too. Whatever, fine. I mean, we found something on the Players Association article on Casey Mize that Chris found many misspellings on a guy who's been writing for a long time. But hey, we're just a fan-sided blog. What the hell do we know? But anyway, I just want fans to find the way to channel the energy in the correct manner for change. I mean, to make positive changes, and just either changes to your viewing experience or whatever, but don't, when you do some sort of it just seems like it goes in an echo chamber. I mean, if you think about it, Twitter is just a microcosm of what else is going on. And I mean, baseball, you look at some of the numbers in the younger demographic, they're dropping off.
Well, Twitter itself is just kind of a cauldron of performative outrage. I think you could go on there and complain about everything, and you'll find a whole bunch of people that will agree with you, and then a bunch of people will yell at you, and that's kind of what it's turned into.
Yep.
But I don't know. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough as a fan, because you just want to have baseball happen. You also want to support the players, the labor, and have a fair outcome. But you're kind of just like, hey, just get it done, guys. Yeah, come on. Take a couple small steps and hopefully, make some progress. But the owners have dug in their heels, and the players are rightfully saying, we're not going to, relent and take this terrible offer that you've given us just because you think you have the power. So
it was almost insulting to see how the minuscule raise they put to the minimum salary. It was beyond shocking.
Well, yeah, and
3% or 3% or something.
Yeah, and a lot of what they've proposed, that they agreed in principle to the idea of that arbitration pool, the pre-arbitration salary pool, but the gulf between them was so vast.
Yeah.
The MLB wants to split 10 million 30 ways, and the players are like, how about 11 times that?
Yeah, the concept actually has some merit, but yes, the total amount of money they wanted to put up was a joke.
Well, I think Patrick over at Bless You Boys was talking about the new TV contract. How much guaranteed money is that what you guys were referring to, right?
No, this is the I was talking about the concept of having a set pool of money for
okay, gotcha.
Pre-arbitration players that can be split among players, the top 30 pre-arbitration players.
Yeah. And it should be almost $100 million or $200 million, and they wanted to make it $10 million to split up 30 ways.
Yeah, and to me, anytime there's a gulf like that, isn't the answer just kind of like, all right, take 10 million, add it to 110 million, 120, we'll meet in the middle, 60 million.
Yeah.
I mean, and that way you're talking like $2 million bonuses for the top 30, or it would be stepped, we assume, in some way, like they do with the draft, where the number one player, pre-arbitration player, would get like 5 million, and the bottom would get 600,000 or something like that.
And the minimum salary just needs to go up. I mean, that's really, I think, where that's where the owners are making their killing, is paying the first year players $500,000. If they could get if the union could get that to 1.5, somewhere close to even $2 million, now you're talking some level of fairness. And it'd be money that the owners would never miss. And now you'd be getting players who are actually doing a lot of the production paid. I don't know how far away they'll be from that, but I think that's what I'm hoping they're shooting for.
Yeah, and it's always been mystifying what the owners care about spending money on, and what they're like. I did a couple years back. I looked and said, if you paid every player in your minor league system $40,000 a year, which is not it's not great money, but it's $20 an hour or whatever for a regular work week.
Yep.
that would cost you $8 million total, basically, which is one Mike Pelfrey. And but no, they scrimp and save on that, on the first year players and second year players, and that you'll hear people talk in football like, hey, the average NFL career is like a year and a half or 2 years. Well, I think something like 50% or close to 50% of players at any given time are pre-arbitration or that their free agency money has never been the problem, really. The top free agents still get paid plenty.
Yep.
Maybe like the middle free agents aren't getting what they used to or something like that, but the top of the heap is still fine. They get tons of money. And where, like you said, where the owners are kind of make the killing is they get a lot of production from these young players. And then by the time they're 29, 30, 31, and it's time to be a free agent, they aren't necessarily great anymore. I think of, I mentioned it before, I think of Austin Jackson, who made a decent amount of money, but he was the best he would ever be in like his first 3-4 seasons. And that happens, it's your guys age differently and their athleticism isn't particularly for players who are reliant on that athleticism, outfielders, shortstops, things like that. Somebody's going to come up behind you and take your job. And so it would be nice to get these guys a little bit more money when they're younger, so it feels a little bit more fair.
Well, even like a guy like Carl Everett comes to mind. I mean, he got paid fat, but by then it was kind of like look at the contract going, well, in theory, that was kind of his running skills, which he was known for, were kind of eroded a little bit at that point.
You Carl Crawford, you mean?
Carl Crawford, sorry. Yeah. Carl Crawford.
No, that's he got a massive contract, and as soon as he got that, he kind of fell apart. And you see that it's kind of wild how many times that happens. It's not necessarily even when a guy gets a good contract. It's I noticed it a couple times again in that trade piece I wrote. Jason Thompston had, I think, another couple good years after he left the Tigers with
he
the
made
Pirates.
The All-Star team.
Pirates.
Yeah, he made the All-Star team with the Pirates in '83, I believe.
But like it's hilarious looking at like Steve Kemp, who they traded straight up for Chet Lemon, and to that point, those two players were like the same age and had basically the same career, and then Steve Kemp basically fell off the map, and Chet Lemon had like 7 consecutive really good seasons. It's like you never know. You don't know. Think of Andrew Jones. Andrew Jones was spectacular defender, tons of power, Hall of Fame level player, and then once he hit 30, it kind of just disappeared. I mean, I think he got paid plenty, but those are kind of outlier cases. And we're thinking more about these middling players who are good to very good when they're younger, and then the skills erode a little bit, and suddenly they're highly replaceable, and you don't have to pay them anything.
I think it was Travis Sawchik. I think he's with CBS Sports, but wherever he writes now, he did an article back in the fall about how much WAR is produced by players at each given age, 22-year-olds, 24-year-olds, 28-year-olds, and how much salary they take up versus how much WAR they produce. And, you don't have to be a genius to figure out where that's going. The 30-year-old players are producing, like, making up numbers here, 10% of the WAR. 24-year-old players were producing 33% of the WAR, but what they were being paid was inverse, right? And and Sawchik's article was talking about how you can see how gradually management is figuring that out, and the money that the older players are making is starting to contract a bit. And that's only going to keep happening. That's why they got to get these guys paid earlier in their career when they're actually doing the production.
Yeah, I mean that's the unfortunate thing about the analytics revolution. I mean, it's been kind of great for fans who dig into it and can compare players and do stuff like that. But teams understand it too, and they're using it against players. And there's a lot of, that part of that war-based arbitration thing is really sketchy. That can go really sideways, and it particularly if Major League Baseball starts producing their own war. And I know which they may do with StatCast, because they've got all the ingredients. They measure defense, they measure speed, they measure all that stuff. So that's a different kind of war they could do. And the players would have to agree to it, of course, but then things could get funny from there. And it's a slippery slope where I know a lot of players don't want to use the wearable technology. stuff that monitors your bat speed or your heart rate or your all that stuff because they feel like whereas it can be pushed to them as something that's going to help them,
it'll be used against them.
Yeah, it can absolutely be used against them. They so the teams will have a like, oh, the baseline bat speed needs to be this, or else you can't succeed. And if it's below, then we're not going to pay them. It's all that stuff, and it's a weird aspect of technology creeping into the game that the players have to be really careful with.
Another thing, the players. I mean, I saw over the last decade, I believe salaries have gone up 12% in a decade, but team value, the worth of a team has gone up like 79% or whatever it is. I mean, it's a massive chasm between the two.
Yeah, and owners always want to say, well, yeah, don't judge us by how much the team is worth, judge us by revenue. And the players are like, why would we do that?
Yeah.
Every bat you take and every stride you make.
This is the Sting portion of the show.
Yeah, it's the Sting. It's where Sting comes in and sings on the owners. I'll be watching you every single day and every single double play you. God damn it! I can rhyme there. I'm not really good at this. Anyways, but no, it's that wearable technology is RFID technology. And I did an article when I had a day job. When I had a day job a few years ago at a contract place, I did NFL because you have next gen stats in the NFL. And you look at guys, I could easily see somebody like Bill James in the background going, I could come back in the game. I could create this. I'll be the architect of this. Watch. I mean, he worked for he consulted with the Red Sox. So I'm just joking about that. But honestly, it's a scary precedent going forward because Fangraphs has, if you look at Fangraphs and Baseball War, they're two different things. Even FIP, they look at it completely differently. And so I can't even imagine baseball going, I mean, for example, an ERA could be 3.98 and baseball, what's the Baseball War, or excuse me, Baseball Reference is so ERA with like ERA plus and those things.
ERA
plus.
I think Baseball Reference uses strict earned runs or runs allowed per 9.
Yeah,
something like that to determine their WAR for pitchers. And Fangraphs uses FIP, which is generally speaking what should have happened, which you can argue doesn't belong in WAR at all because, right. I mean, it helps you project for the future maybe and say, hey, this guy got lucky, this guy got unlucky. We're hoping that Eduardo Rodriguez was very unlucky last year. And we're also hoping that Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal weren't super lucky last year. But that's what FIP says would happen. But yeah, and then if you were to bring in the StatCast version of WAR, it would involve things like expected outs above average and exit velocity and things like that. And it's just it's hard to find. Again, people work hard on these to get them as accurate as possible, but it's still just a man-made number that's flawed in areas, and you never know what a player's true value to a team is. As best they can try, you don't know, and so it could get kind of funky.
So before I don't know if you guys have anything else to say before we get out of here, or before we go on to the last part of the show, which I wanted to. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, or on Twitch, or on Facebook, first and foremost, thank you for watching. And I wanted to go over the Luis Castillo, not the one you're thinking of, but the Tigers signed 2 pitchers in the 2 minor league contracts, 2 players, one being Luis Castillo, who's been closing games down in the Dominican Winter League. And also he was originally part of the Diamondback system. And I got him up here. This is a relief appearance in AA Amarillo. And he is a guy that has an interesting change up here, Chris. I don't know what your impressions were of him, and your impressions of him, Uper, but I don't know, like there's something to be said about a guy with kind of his fastball. I didn't think hit more than 94, but I thought his secondary offense were pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been strictly a reliever for a long time now. And yeah, you see, it's kind of a long arm swing, and I don't know. Some people who think that that's kind of out of favor, and it gives the players a longer time to see the ball, particularly, I guess, lefties. But yeah, his changeup does seem like it's a good above average pitch. And the Tigers need pitching depth in their minors. They need more veteran relievers. They need more veteran starters. So it was totally made sense to me. And he's a guy who's a little bit interesting. It's a solid arm, and who knows? You never know with a reliever. They could pop one year and suddenly he's in the majors and he's striking out 50 guys in 30 innings, something like that.
I mean, the only way you find another Jose Cisnero is keep signing guys like this, who have been healthy, who have some ability. A mid-90s heater with a great changeup. Can he be Joaquin Benoit light for a year or two? You never know. So you sign these guys and see who surfaces.
Yeah, and by the way, the Colombia won the Caribbean World Series. That was
really,
that's a huge thing considering in Puerto Rico, I think we're 0 for 5 there. So that was kind of a surprise. Usually Colombia has been kind of relatively new to the game in terms of being new to the game, or not new to the game rather, but as a powerhouse, or not really known as a powerhouse in the international scene.
Seems like they don't usually have the depth.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, like that tends to be the case because Colombia has had some really good players. I think Edgar Renteria was from Colombia. It's kind of like Brazil will occasionally have like a decent MLB player, but they're still they're not Venezuela and the Dominican Republic especially, and of course Cuba. Those are always going to be the powerhouses. Yeah, Panama was that where Rivera was from? Mariano Rivera is from Panama.
Yeah. Peru too, I think.
Yeah, so there are. I'm looking at who else is from Colombia. Jorge Alfaro, Orlando Cabrera, Julio Teheran, famed Tiger Julio Teheran, Jose Quintana. So yeah, I mean they've got. But again, they've had. It looks like 30 pitched in the majors and 28 have hit. So it's not quite Dominican Republic level, which would have, I don't know, 200 players in the majors right now. That might be exaggeration, but probably not too far off.
And then the other player that the Tigers signed was another Luis Carpo, who is 24 years old, out of Venezuela, as he was in the Mets system as an infielder. So if you look at his numbers last year, 249 with a 709 OPS at AA Bennington for the Rumble Ponies. So I'll be pulling some video for that for this weekend to put on the Tiger Minor Report Facebook and the Twitter to see what he's all about. And so far, as Evan Woodbury reported, so it's Luis Castillo, Luis Carpo, Gerson Moreno signed last week, and he also had a pretty decent and small sample Dominican Winter League, and that's an arm, Chris, that picked up velocity.
Well, so he was always a hard throwing kid. I remember listening to, we talked about it before. He kind of popped up from Connecticut, or maybe they were still at that point in 2015. I don't know if that was still Oneonta or whatever. I think they had gone to Connecticut at that point, but he popped up for the Whitecaps at the very end of the season and was serving as kind of a setup man for then closer Joe Jimenez. And I remember him touching triple digits on the the scoreboard there in West Michigan, which probably means he was hitting 98 or so. But he's always had a live arm, and he was briefly on the Tigers 40-man roster, and then he hurt his arm, and they did the thing that they did with Franklin Perez, where they designated him for assignment or whatever, or outrighted him, and then re-signed him. And he's come back, and he's been in spring training a couple times, and he'll show you mid 95, 96. But it's he tends to spray it all over the place. But it's a powerful arm, and they're familiar with him, and he's familiar with them, and they need the depth. And so you keep taking chances on a guy who can throw the ball hard. It's guys like that, they always have a job somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's really, in terms of actual baseball news, if you get a chance, go to, here's what's worth a subscription, absolutely, is The Athletic. Cody Saberhagen did a really fantastic job on a piece on Akil Baddoo, so worth checking. Again, I can't express enough how Cody nailed it, and he's been doing these good in-depth pieces. And I think even right now with I forgot Nuke Logan Shore was in the organization for a minute, and then Chris Mikowski on the Detroit News did a piece on them. So And then if you have a chance, I'll put the audio to the compound for Zach Schwartz. They had Robbie Grossman on there as a shout out to Steve Ghostmav on our Discord channel, which, by the way, I should put that link in there more. We're getting some more people in Discord. So thank you for joining the Discord, as that is continuous Tiger Talk all day long without the Twitter. I guess just strictly Tiger Talk, minor leagues, whatever you want to talk. Just another word. I mean, we have a good
lively discussions in there.
Yeah, lively discussions, but it's all civil. So if you're gonna be a dick, don't join it. I mean, no, honestly, if you're gonna be a dick, I don't want any. It's. I'm not trying to be inclusive about it, but just like I know you and Ghost but you guys got in a spirited discussion last week, Chris. But then it was, like I said, resolved.
Yeah. Well, no, it was. Yeah, it was me trying, basically saying like, hey, the owners do exist. As much as we kind of all hate them and think they're greedy and don't necessarily, I don't necessarily hate them, but we think they're in the wrong here, and we're for the players. But I was just trying to be realistic and say, hey, they do exist. They do have power here. We have to acknowledge that. We can't we can't just be like, oh, the players should just strike forever. That'd be great if they did that and got what they wanted. But at some point, the players are going to say, hey, we want to. This is kind of ridiculous. We want to play. Can we come up with some agreement? And basically, and that was our only disagreement. Was I was trying to say like, yes, I understand. He was saying I was both siding it, And I was just saying I'm just trying to be realistic. Like, we don't have to like the owners, but we have to acknowledge that they kind of have a lot of power here. So
you're fairly certain that Green Bay Packers will remain the only community-owned sports franchise.
Yeah. And boy, that would be a nice model for baseball teams, because the Packers have done pretty well for themselves although I remember them being pretty bad in the 80s, I think.
Oh yeah, they had their downtime.
But it goes to show you how important having a good quarterback is.
Yeah, and even like it was interesting. You look at somebody like, speaking of the Rams, by the way, and ownership. You look at a guy like Stan Kroenke.
Kroenke, yep.
He got sued. He has an NFL and him have to pay $790 million to settle a lawsuit by the relocating to Los Angeles. I mean, he was like, I'm going to do it my way. I don't care. He just basically gave everybody St. Louis the finger. And I mean, he was just, in terms of how much he turned down a bid. He's so rich. He turned down a bid, a $2.5 billion bid for Arsenal, the soccer team. I mean, it's massive. He also owns the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Rockies, and he also has the Colorado Rapids, an MLS team, and the Colorado Mammoth, which is indoor lacrosse. But
he owns several vending machines and a car wash as well. So, yeah, like these. I don't know. Again, I have no concept of what it's like to be a billionaire. I can imagine, but I'll never know, and I have no sympathy for them or whatever. But again, they have all that money, which gives them a tremendous amount of power, and at some point, like I said, the players can hold out forever. I mean, they've been locked out by the owner, so I'm not trying to say that the players are doing this. I'm just saying to find an agreement that at some point the players are going to have to accept something that the owners give them. That's all I was saying. So I don't know. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's a super annoying thing to have to be talking about. We had my buddy asked that one question about the 3 things that could go right for the Tigers and 3 things that could go wrong. And like, number 1, there's no season that could go wrong.
That could go really wrong.
But I actually did. I did a a real answer to that. If we want to discuss it at all, or we can
go ahead. You guys go ahead. I'm gonna get something to drink real quick. So
all right. Well, yeah, basically, I presume, like, again, there could be 1,000 different things that go right and 1,000 different things that go wrong. I presume he wants to be sort of realistic, so I'm not going to say that, like, hey, Jammer Candelario hits 55 home runs. He's a good player, but he's not going to be that kind of player, I don't think. But so I kind of looked at it from both sides. I did like 3 things and then did the flip and the flop, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I thought was on the better side, I think, and again, trying to be realistic, that the 3 young starters all take moderate steps forward. And I do think a lot of fans kind of have just assumed that's going to happen.
Yeah.
which, in the history of baseball tells us that that's not the way it works. Just remember back to Justin Verlander, who was good in 2006, took a step forward in 2007, and then had an ugly 2008 before really becoming Justin Verlander in 2009.
Yep.
And that could happen with all three of these guys. But I think, so in that case, Casey Mize becomes kind of, he bumps up the strikeouts. One more per 9. Not a big deal. He was like 6 per 9 this year, or 7 per 9. Get it up to 8 per 9. Don't be a strikeout machine. But I think with his style of pitching, he's more of a pitch to contact guy. It's not like an old school pitch to contact guy, but I could see him taking a step forward and eventually becoming like a Marcus Stroman, where he's going to be like a consistent 3.5, 4-win player by racking up innings and keeping the ERA fairly low with a lot of ground balls.
And when you think about going from 7 Ks to 8, that's a 14% increase. When you look at it that way, that's far more significant, stretched out over 32 starts or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's completely doable. He was a guy who at times would completely lose his splitter, which was supposed to be his big strikeout pitch. So I think he can maybe find that, or we've seen before, he's a really kind of intelligent guy who likes to get into the science of pitching. I think he'll figure some things out. I mean, he's got a great pitching coach to do that. And with Skubal, Skubal's, the strikeouts are there, and his walks aren't too bad. He was throwing a lot more strikes last year than he did the year before.
Yep.
But the big thing with him is cutting down on the home runs. And part of that is just not – it just seemed like too often he would kind of – I don't want to say not think about it, but he would just kind of throw a fastball sort of over the heart of the plate. And it would go – it was almost like he just was either thinking too much about the next pitch or the pitch before and would let something go. And part of that is just more experience. But I think – so he was 2.1 home runs per 9 last year, which is not – that's like Matthew Boyd level home run. Yep. Like, hey, we've got an issue here. If you can just get that down to 1.5 per 9, which is not great. But it's much better. You could be with what else he does. He could be a legit number 2 starter, even with that many home runs. It's like a Lucas Giolito style number 2 starter, which is all-star level.
Yep. And
with Matt Manning, kind of what you want is him taking a step forward to sort of be what Mize was this year. Because Manning was a guy who got he gave up hard contact, but surprisingly little for power. He's a very strange pitcher by the outcome. He didn't strike anybody out, and he was walking kind of a few people, but most of those walks came in like 3 outings. So you just want him to have a little bit more consistency, a few less blow-ups. I think what I looked at. So he had 18 starts last year, and 53% of the runs he allowed last year came in 4 starts. He gave up more than half of his runs in just 4 outings, and the other 14 had an ERA of 3.31. So just, instead of having 4 blowups, have 2. That's good progress, right? I think that's fair.
So that's fair to ask.
So that's, and I know that was kind of long-winded, but that was like my one step. So hey, the 3 young pitchers all take a small step forward. I think that makes for a better season. I think Akil Baddoo improving on both sides of the ball, I think is possible. I don't think it's crazy, but I also don't think it's a foregone conclusion like I did with the other guys. It's so much of defense. We talked about this on last week's show. There's so much of playing good defense is your instincts and your reads and routes, and those might not be something you can really improve on that much. But you would hope with a little bit more time, it's going to get a little bit better. He's certainly a good enough athlete to be an average outfielder. I'm not saying he's got to be a Gold Glover, but he was a little bit below average this year. Just get it to average. Yeah. That's fine. He's a 90th percentile sprint guy. I could see that. And as a hitter, we saw him. It was kind of an up and down season for him, but it came in different ways. He was making better swing decisions later in the year. He's swinging in the zone more in the second half last year, but the contact he was making was lesser. So I don't know if that was pitchers realizing that he wasn't going to hurt them as much in the zone, or realizing that he wasn't going to chase. But so he was swinging, missing at strikes a lot earlier in the season, right, and making more contact him later in the season, but not hitting the ones he did hit harder. So just split the difference there. A little bit more contact, a little bit harder, and get up to 20 home runs or something. 25. It's not out of the question, I think. And then the last one I had was Javi Baez going full 2018, which I is probably unlikely, but if you look at it, his numbers last year weren't all that different than they were in 2018 when he was a 5+ WAR player. I think he might have been 6 WAR to Baseball Reference. And that year he hit 290 with 34 homers and 21 steals, playing above average defense.
Especially if he plays like he did with his numbers with the Mets are off the charts. They're fantastic.
Yeah, and so last year his average was 265, so it dropped 25 points. Not great. Strikeout rates were up. That's a concern. But 31 home runs and 18 steals. That's 3 off of both categories there. The big difference, and he actually did that in 20 fewer games than he did in 2018. And the big difference was he didn't hit nearly as many doubles last year. But still, it's a power speed combination with above average defense. It's not out of the question to me that he has another big year like that. So I think those are the 3 things that could happen that would make the Tigers a lot better next year.
I could see him leading the league in triples.
Yeah, absolutely. With playing at Comerica Park, and he's a guy that he's gonna hit the ball and run like his hair's on fire. So, and then kind of the flip side of that was that all 3 of those things go bad. So Mize, Skubal, and Manning get injured or take a step back. We said that it's entirely possible. I mentioned it earlier. Both Mize and Skubal had ERAs that were full run lower than their FIP, which suggests that they were very lucky. They might, we've talked about it before. They might actually be better this year, but have higher ERAs just because of the way luck works. Sure. And with Manning, I kind of got into a little bit of when we were doing inside the numbers and stuff last year. I got into a little rut of complaining about Manning seemingly every show. But if you look at his numbers from last year, they're a lot like Jose Ureña's, except Ureña threw harder and got more swings and misses on his breaking ball. So, like I said, Manning was confusing to me last year, and I don't know. We'll see what happens with him this year. But it's entirely possible that he doesn't take the step forward that we want. And then with Baddoo, it's entirely possible he takes has a sophomore slump. There's a name for that for a reason. It happens to a lot of guys.
Yeah.
He had a WRC plus of 121 in the first half last year, and it was 95 in the second half. Now part of that was he had a really rough August, then he was hurt. He got back up above 100 in September, but if he goes a full season with a 95 WRC plus, that's a 4th outfielder.
Yes.
So, and it's possible. Hopefully he figures it out. I really like Akil Baddoo, and he's got a lot of skill. So I'm holding out hope. And then with Javi Baez, instead of going 2018, maybe he goes 2020 when he hit 203 with 8 home runs and had a negative WAR to Fangraphs and less than 1 to Baseball Reference. I think he was dealing with some injuries that year, and he was probably one of those guys who struggled without the ability to watch. Well, they weren't letting guys watch video between at bats.
Crazy.
Whatever. Yeah, and we saw some really good players struggle. JD Martinez did too. So
I'm
just
said
saying,
many times I'm willing to give a mulligan to almost anybody at 2020.
But I think it's very possible that Javi Baez is just going to be a super streaky hitter, and we've seen that before. I think of Justin Upton in his first year as the Tigers, right? He was a negative WAR player by the All-Star break. He was just brutal. And then the final 2 months of the year, he carried the team. So we could see that too. But anyway, those are my semi-realistic ideas about what could make the Tigers better this year or worse this year.
All right. Well,
hard to argue with any of them.
I figured somebody else might talk about like Torkelson and Green, so I wanted to avoid them. But
I was just there's 3 things that I was going to bring up, and really one of them is a continued development of a bullpen arm. And what I mean by that is we look at Funkhauser and you look at some of the progress they had, and likes of even to a certain extent Soto. I mean, Soto when he had a high amount of walks. He had 40 walks in 63 innings last year. So maybe he cuts back the walks, becomes even a better reliever than his all-star season. So you look at that, and if somebody else is going to step up and be another reliever that the Tigers are gonna not expect. I think that's a big turnaround because right now they haven't targeted any free. Even before the lockout, they weren't mentioned with any relievers or anything, and they might just take a reclamation project. And a guy like Jacob Barnes, who they signed, could be that. They could have somebody else they could have in mind in that too. So I think what could go right if they get another arm like that surprise everybody. Number 2, this goes without saying, if they can get Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green to do anything above near 2 WAR. I mean, if that would be a big difference. I mean, right now Fangraphs had him projected to finish under 500, and if Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson can jump above that, then I'll put him definitely over. And the third thing really is Ryan Kreidler, and I say Ryan Kreidler because if you look at Jonathan Scope and his injury history, if he might be down for a series of time, or Candelario, Ryan Kreidler's your next person up. I mean, you're going to look at, depending on what they do with Isaac Paredes, what have you. If Ryan Kreidler can play up to what is he expected, based off what he's expected to do, and not be a 200 hitter with a lot of strikeouts, but instead be hitting 275, and they can move him over to second or third or short, wherever he can play him, and it be an adequate replacement, then that to me is progress. Because if you look at like we've talked about this, the infield depth on the Tiger system right now is bad. And Cody Clemens on the 40-man roster, which is great, it gives him a left-handed pop, but is he more of a utility player or than a full-time player? You don't really have a full-time player in the system right now that can come in and do anything. So if Kreidler can do that, great. Yep. If anything's that go wrong, I mean, I can't disagree with you on that, on the Chris, on the pitchers. I mean, that's totally logical. That totally makes sense. If they get another catcher injured, I mean, if you think about this, if Tucker Bernhardt goes down, you have Eric Haas and like nothing else,
and whoever's on the street with a pulse.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And that kind of goes, not to interrupt you, sorry, but like injuries could destroy anybody's season, and you see it. Look at the Padres last year; they basically every one of their starters got injured to some degree, and they fell apart the second half. Did they finish with the same record as the Tigers, or worse than the Tigers?
I think around the same. I think.
Yeah, it was pretty close, and it was like they were supposed to contend for like 100 wins, and injuries can destroy any team in any season. So
that's true, but I mean, in this case, you look at in terms of catching right now, you have Rogers who's not around, and you have Eric Haas who, again, really good backup. He can play. I like him more in the outfield too at this point. He can do anything you need him to do. But then you look at AAA and AA. There's not really, you look at Dinkler's not probably a year or two away before he.
Is Garneau back?
Yeah, Garneau is still on the 40-man. So right now they have 4 catches in the 40-man. Jake Rogers is going to be on the 60-day as soon as the season or spring training starts. But they've got Haas, Barnhart, and Garneau. Yeah, I mean, you're talking, if something goes down, you're looking at Brady Policelli probably coming up. Maybe Chris Proctor in an emergency. I mean, that's just the way it is. Like the catching depth scares me. The pitching depth scares me.
Grayson Grinder's one phone call away.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's we joke about it, but that like teams love to have catchers who have been in the system and know the pitching. And I mean, Garneau was on the team. He left, and then they brought him back when Rogers got hurt because he knew who he was going to be catching. So yeah, that's a good one, Raj.
Yeah, because it's scary across the board. You got anything to add before we get out of here?
Well, the three things that could go right. One of them's on a bigger level than just in Detroit. Is do the playoffs get expanded? If the playoffs get expanded enough, the season takes on a different look. It's going to be a sprint to 85 wins. Might get you a spot in the playoffs. And the Tigers, to go from 77 wins to 92 wins is going to take a lot of work, but 77 to 85 is only half as much work. So it's possible. So
yeah, sorry I cut you off there, but and beyond that, if there's a shortened season, that makes it even more. You think to 2020, what a 60-game season with 16 teams in the playoffs, was it?
Yeah,
total. Yeah, I mean, Tiger could be making the playoffs this year for sure.
So, and the thing to me, is defense, because we talked about Mize taking that step forward. Well, if he's still in ground ball mode more than strikeout mode, having Baez at shortstop, if Riley Green shows himself to be a real center fielder at the MLB level, and depending on what they do at second base, whether it's Scope or if they bring somebody in who's got a glove, I think the defense can take a tangible step forward. And that, obviously helps the team. It helps those three pitchers Chris is talking about, especially Casey Mize. And then Eduardo Rodriguez. I know, we talk about F WAR and B WAR, and people talk about the merits. But facts are, a couple of years ago, we put up a 6 WAR season via B WAR. If he's that guy again, the team can probably take a step forward in the win-loss column. Because if he's healthy and he can make 32 starts, putting up that kind of production, and the three kids make some steps forward, that's pretty nice rotation, potentially. Now, you're asking for a lot of things to go right. So when we talk about the three things that can go wrong, I mean, any of those things can go wrong too.
Yeah, the one thing, it's important to have starting pitching depth, and the Tigers just don't right now. But it is interesting because they might by June or July, which is weird to say. It's just that all the starters on the 40-man who haven't, who aren't, we're projecting to the rotation right now. I think Ronnie Garcia is the only pitcher on there who's actually started a game with the MLB level. You got Alex Faedo and Joey Wentz. Basically, that's it.
Yeah.
But we've talked before. Bo Brisky could theoretically pitch his way to the majors. Reese Olson could do it. Garrett Hill maybe in a Logan Shore. I think Raj mentioned there are some guys out there that they could call on. It's just not. Last year they really beefed up their depth and they needed it. They had Arena and they had Tehran get hurt. They lost Turnbull. They lost Boyd. They're starting Drew Hutchison at the end of the year. It's I don't know, something they need to look into.
Well, when this lockout ends too, I mean, there are still free agents out there. Will the Tigers participate in what should be, a rush to sign those last few guys? And maybe cut rate prices. I mean, because I'm sure those players are going to be desperate for gigs too.
Or do they make a trade? I mean, again, there's a possibility with you have to consider where you're going to put Paredes or where you're going to put Candelario. I mean, Candelario is Arbitron. Wow.
Radio ratings?
Yeah, radio ratings.
Arbitron would be a great name for a nickname for a baseball player, but
the Arbitron. He is eligible for a raise, so who knows? Again, but that we don't know what the collective. Maybe that's why they're not going to do any kind of trades like that until after the CBA is finalized. So who knows? I again, this is pure speculation, but at the same time, I think making a trade for pitching based off what the free agent market is, and Jake did a really good job writing up the Matt Harveys in the world and the Zach Greinke's. You're just literally doing what you did with a la Matt Moore or who's the one that I always forget about, the former Tyson Ross. I mean,
Tyson Ross, and Mike Fiers.
Mike Fiers. I mean, you want everybody to turn out like Mike Fiers, and you can turn them around for what? Logan Shore came over from the Fiers deal, or was that
Logan Shore and Nolan Blackwood? I think were in the Mike Fiers deal.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So, hopefully there's some sort of. I think a trade would be more of a better idea than taking a chance on our older arm, because like I said, some of the free agent arms that are left, I just don't know if they have much wear for them. So, but before we got out of here, I just wanted to mention I'm working with Corey Ellman, who is who's been a listener for a while. He came up with a really good idea about doing a card a month giveaway. I got to work out all the details. So if anybody's interested in trade cards and doing like a little private club and for everybody, I'll have to figure out. I have the details, but I'll go more into it as soon as I figure that out with Corey, because we're going to try to find somebody. We want to make sure privacy and addresses and all that stuff don't be given away. So we did give out 3 of the dice games that went out. Another Canadian listener from the Tiger Line Report got his, I think yesterday or today, and he posted on it. So, but I don't want to forget his name, so I don't want to be that guy and go, oh yeah, random dude. And we have the internet in front of us. Chad Gibbons over his Twitter handles at Boomer Gibbons, and yeah, we gave him, and he was looking forward to something new. He DM'd us, was talking about like he's stuck indoors and all that. So
yeah, Canada was in another lockdown, right?
Yeah.
I don't. We've talked about it before. We've touched on some card stuff before, and cards at this point it's a strange and confusing world to me, like NFTs and cryptocurrency. I feel like an old man, but I don't know if you guys saw that there was something Benny Montgomery was the first round pick for the Rockies last year, an outfielder out of Pennsylvania, and somebody like accused him of having his mom do some signatures or something on cards, and he went and showed a video that showed he can write his name like 2 different ways, and he did them both. And then he said, "I'm waiting for somebody to find this," and he had signed one of his cards Borat.
Yeah.
It just says Borat, and I was like, "Oh God, I've got to get that card." So there's one of those floating out there somewhere. I don't know if it's turned up yet, but I was like, "Well, that's fantastic."
Who was the dick that told me? Why does it matter?
I don't think he
started it. Get the fuck out of here.
To be fair, the guy kind of owned up to it and apologized and said he wasn't trying to. He was just trying to like make a joke that like, hey, these look completely different. But I think anybody would understand. I remember seeing the video of like when the Tigers signed AJ Hinch and he's out there at a table with like 6,000 baseballs he's got to sign. It's like, yeah, that's the part of the job that I wouldn't really want to deal with.
Yeah, just like, I mean, after a while, I would get kind of cramped.
Oh, I have no question.
I hope that the day that somebody actually asked for my autograph or something, which will never happen, but if it did, look, if somebody asked us for our autograph in some weird way, I just would literally go, I just go like the quick one, because my hand, I look at some of my mom's handwriting, or her handwriting is like eerily identical. It's really weird. Like my sister got us her recipe board, and she kind of engraved it in this wood, so it's now on it's on our wall now in her kitchen. And I was looking, it's for her rice arroz con pollo recipe, and her handwriting is identical. So I don't know why I mentioned that, but just anyway, signatures, all that. So
my signature is absolutely awful. Nobody wants it. I don't understand the whole thing of signatures anyway.
Me neither,
It doesn't make any sense. If you want to take a picture or shake my hand, that's awesome. I would do that with people that I admire. I have no desire to have you write your name on a piece of paper. It seems very strange to me.
I have never
really odd
in my life. Never done it. No, it's so funny though. I ran into those cool autograph books from my father-in-law this year, and I'm ecstatic as hell about it.
Well, that's true. Like
Jackie Robinson and so on, but I spent my whole life not caring.
Yeah, we found some of those in my grandfather's things. He's got these autographs from like Aldous Huxley and like these authors from 100 years ago. Like, well, hey, that's kind of cool. So yeah, I guess I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but still, I just like, it doesn't really matter to me. But I'm sure a lot of people care. So cool. Some people collect signatures. Some people collect cards, coins, whatever.
Yeah,
I stood right next to Jack Nicklaus once, and I was really into golf in my 20s and 30s. I didn't care about his signature. To me, I spoke to the man for like 15 seconds, like actually asked him a couple questions, and he talked to me. I could care less if I had his name scribbled on a golf ball.
I usually freeze up when I meet people, because I remember when I interviewed Alan Trammell, I like before I kid you not, Uber, right before I was on there, I was like reciting his sites and everything, and then I met him like, do you remember when you were on the Tigers? And I just froze. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to ask. He's a busy man. I didn't want to bother him, and I just wanted to talk to him for a few minutes about his days at AA Montgomery, which is the hat I was wearing earlier if you're watching. And I froze. I knew he played at Montgomery. I'm like, why the hell I could remember that?
It's one thing to meet him in a bar, and another thing to try to get something out of him for your work. I mean, for something productive. There's some pressure on you. I don't blame you.
Yeah, I mean, I bet if I met him at a bar or somewhere, I would be kind of relaxed, because I would have a drink or two and maybe like, remember we had vertigo and he had to miss part of the season as a manager. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, I can do it. I can do it off the top of my head right now. Just boom. How the hell do I remember that? I don't know. Vertigo.
Well,
yeah, damn U2 album, but anyway.
Well, that was you at least got some answers out of him. He did not want to talk to me about any of the Tigers prospects. I was like, hey, what about this guy? He's like, I don't want to say anything. I'm like, what? And this guy? He's like, nah. I'm like, alrighty then.
To this day, I don't remember those actually I do, but we're never gonna.
Yeah, it's fine.
So anyway, like I said, sorry about the show, but Emily said she'll be in next Thursday. We'll have Hasty on here in a couple days, and then from there we will continue to figure out what we're gonna do in terms of content. Because honestly, right now, I mean, with the minor league season, we can do minor league preview. There's a lot of things we could do, but that's until we get some more roster stuff. We won't know for sure.
And
we're not having a Tanner Colehep segment this week.
I guess not this week.
Yeah.
We talk about the
days since a Tanner Colehep reference.
We are 2 weeks away from college baseball starting, and so we will start putting out some draft content. I mean, the draft isn't for another 4 months, but it'll give us an excuse to talk about some baseball. The Tigers, for the first time in 5 years, they're not picking in the top 10, so we'll get some interesting names to discuss.
We should do a Big Ten preview, Chris. I would be down for that. I need to watch. Sure. I mean, I'm down. I've been watching a little bit here and there of the Cuban League whenever it's posted on Twitter. So that, and I watched maybe a couple innings of the Caribbean World Series, but that was hard to find. That was like in a needle in a haystack. Really, you get to hide baseball from us? Thanks, Dix. That's really cool. But again, if you're watching us on YouTube, I have the Pitching Ninja shirt for Emily Walden's fight against cancer. So go to our show description, order it if you haven't so already. Please do so to help her out with her cost. And like I said, there will be a couple shows coming up here. Emily for sure next week, and then Dan Hasty, broadcaster of the West Michigan Whitecaps, and also the voice of the UD Mercy Titans. Ooh. As the weather has kind of screwed him over. And by the way, fantastic job with Dan on the his Queen album. So that is, if that's something you haven't seen yet, if you go to our Twitter or Facebook, I haven't posted on Facebook, but Dan perfectly posted that picture.
Well, yeah, and really, you've been killing it with the graphics lately. If people don't know, you do all of those.
Yes.
So they're really great.
My buddy Tom goes, "We have too much time in your hands." I'm like, I've been working. I work on graphics for my marketing job. I do more graphics now than I ever have. So it's just getting in the practice of it. And by the way, yes, we all have day jobs. So the reason why I mentioned that is somebody mentioned on LinkedIn. I think on LinkedIn, or I forgot. Somebody I was watching a championship game on Sunday, and a buddy of mine was like, "So you do the podcast and the writing full time?" I said, "No, I still have a day job." It was a buddy's his buddy's wife who I've never met, and then she's like, "Why?" I'm like, I like doing it. And so anyway, so if you're wondering, but anyways, I digress. Enough rambling for now. We'll see you next week. Have a good week, everybody.